Hi, hello, it's Sugar. Here's my guide to Scalecommandar Sarkareth. This boss has 3 phases and an intermission that happens between phase 1 and 2, or anytime a player reaches 10 stacks of Oblivion, which I'll explain in more detail later. Phase 1 introduces the first mechanic that should be baited, Scorching Bombs. 2 of these spawn near ranged players, causing damage to anyone within 10 yards. It is crucial not to drop these bombs in melee. Simultaneously, the boss unleashes Glittering Surge, a raid-wide AoE, and cannot be moved. All range and heals should position off to one side of the boss and move away from the bombs as they spawn. After 12 seconds, these explode with Scorching Detonation, dealing a burst of damage, applying a 5-second dot on the raid, and leaving behind a patch of burning ground. In heroic difficulty, drifting embers will begin falling onto the platform that need to be dodged for the rest of the phase. Sarkareth will then cast Oppressing Howl on the raid. This pushes players away and applies a debuff that needs to be removed before the final Glittering Surge. Anyone who still has this when it goes off will be dazzled, stunning them for 12 seconds and dealing lethal damage with each tick. To remove the debuff, clear in groups by standing in either Mass Disintegrate or Searing Breath. Each removes Oppressing Howl but applies a new debuff in return. Disintegrated slows movement speed by 25% and deals medium ticking damage every 5 seconds. Stand in one of the blue lines targeting a player to get this debuff. While Seared applies a dot that deals light ticking damage every second, take 1 tick of Searing Breath to gain this debuff. Both have their advantages and disadvantages. Overall, you'll take less damage over time from Mass Disintegrate, but if the slow from it makes it too hard to dodge other mechanics, use Searing Breath. It's more overall damage, so the healers won't like you, but being able to dodge mechanics should balance it. Every time a player clears the Oppressing Howl debuff, Echoing Howl will deal raid-wide damage. Plan your healing cooldowns accordingly to effectively mitigate this damage. In this phase, tanks will deal with Burning Claws, a 27-second dot that upon expiration deals 15% of the damage back at the raid. Use mitigation and taunt swap every cast to minimize the damage the raid takes. After 2 Glittering Surges, a short intermission begins. Oblivion activates, dealing light ticking damage, and upon reaching 10 stacks, transports players into the Emptiness between stars, a realm where players will need to collect 3 fragments of their mind within 20 seconds in order to return to the normal world. There are also Astral Flares in this realm that increase haste and movement speed. Collect 10 of these to maximize your buff before collecting your final mind fragment. When the majority of the raid has returned, interrupt the boss to start phase 2. The raid should do their best to stay stacked together in this phase to bait Abyssal Breath. Sarkareth will fly in a line to a location, knocking players away and leaving void residue on the ground. This will also spawn Null Glimmer ads. Nuke these and interrupt their Blasting Scream ability before they become immune from Ebon Might. This occurs anytime Sarkareth casts a spell, increasing their damage and movement speed by 15%, and at 5 stacks makes them immune to CC and interrupts. In Heroic, their Rescind ability heals them for 4% every second. To remove this, they must be dipped into a Desolate Blossom, which spawns on melee players. To make this very easy, melee should not chase the boss during his breath and stack on top of the ads until Desolate Blossom pools appear beneath them. Once dipped, the ads can be moved outside of the pools to finish off. As this is happening, 2 Void Bombs will spawn. These appear on the ranged players, pulsing damage on anyone within 12 yards. After 20 seconds, they explode, dealing lethal damage. To prevent this from wiping the raid, assign players to pick them up and take them to the Emptiness between stars. Standing on the bomb picks it up, so everyone should be ready to move as these spawn to prevent non-assigned players from accidentally grabbing them. Assigned players can stand in any Void Residue or Desolate Blossom to push their stacks to 10 and enter the realm. Here, the bomb will safely time out, dealing no damage. In both this phase and the next, managing Oblivion stacks becomes a personal responsibility. If you have over 6 stacks, I suggest quickly pushing them to 10 to go to the other realm. Grab 10 Astral Flares and your mind fragments in this realm and avoid overlapping with any lethal mechanics when you come up. In Heroic, a player is targeted with a dispellable debuff called Infinite Duress, a 30-second dot that deals light damage every 3 seconds. This player should move to the edge of the platform and wait to be dispelled. Once removed, Dread will trigger, inflicting raid-wide damage and knocking all players away from them. The dispelled player is knocked up rather than away. In this phase, tanks will be hit with Void Claws, an 18-second dot with a 25% healing reduction. Upon expiration, a Void Blast explodes in a 20-yard radius, inflicting 40% of the damage taken from the dot. Swap each stack and run away from the raid before it explodes. Phase 3 begins when the boss reaches 40%. Oblivion and Void Bombs remain active, requiring the raid to continue handling them as previously mentioned. Additionally, in Heroic, the ability Infinite Duress is still in effect. Positioning and baiting mechanics here is very important and can be done a few ways. Start by quickly dragging the boss to the middle of the room, facing north, with the raid stacked behind him. At this point, the boss will cast Cosmic Ascension, creating a 30-yard zone that the raid needs to get out of. Each time this is cast, Sarkareth gains a stack of Ebon Might, increasing his damage by 10%. Upon explosion, this creates Astral Formations near players that need to be baited on the southern edge of the platform. There are two methods to deal with this. The first has the player with Infinite Duress run ahead of the group and then dispel them to knock the raid safely to the southern edge of the room, stack up, and then run away from the rocks that appear. The second method utilizes a Warlock Gate to transport the raid to the southern edge of the room, after which the Infinite Duress player is dispelled, knocking the raid to the middle and away from the rock formations. We chose to do the first method as it proved more effective for us. Regardless of the method chosen, it's important to be prepared to grip or rescue the player affected by Infinite Duress, as they are only knocked up and not away from the mechanics. These methods also work in normal, just without the Infinite Duress ability. In addition to the previously mentioned mechanics, Null Glimmer adds will spawn as the zone explodes. Unlike in Phase 2, there are no Desolate Blossoms available to neutralize their healing from Rescind and Heroic. Prioritize them and use any available means to slow down their healing. After this first Cosmic Ascension and baiting the Astral Formations is over, the raid should use Hero. Shortly after this, a player is chosen for Embrace of Nothingness. After 8 seconds, this forms a black hole that inflicts damage split evenly among everyone struck. We like to soak this first one in melee because we have Hero going and want to keep uptime on the boss. These can also be soaked on top of Astral Formations to help them absorb and reduce their raid-wide damage, and I recommend doing that if your team is being overwhelmed by this damage. Otherwise, keep them near melee with everyone soaking. Next, we'll use the Astral Formations to protect against Scouring Eternity, a deadly AoE. Faint lines will appear from them that span the length of the platform. This is why we baited them at the southern end to ensure everyone can continue to DPS the boss during this. Stand in one of these lines, you'll know you're safe when the wind is no longer pushing you back. Hurtling Barrage will target several players, and then images will charge towards them. Move away so this doesn't charge through the raid group. Throughout this phase, Motes of Oblivion will continuously rain down on the platform. It's important to avoid being hit by these motes unless you intentionally need to go to the Emptiness Between Stars realm. Each hit from the motes applies 5 stacks of Oblivion. The tank mechanic in this phase is a combination of Phase 1 and 2's versions. It's called Void Slash. This hits the tank in a frontal cone, dealing physical and shadow damage every 2 seconds, while reducing healing received by 25% for 21 seconds. Additionally, when it erupts with Void Blast, it inflicts 40% of the shadow damage taken onto the raid group. Tanks can protect the raid from this by going to the Emptiness Between Stars and letting it time out there. It's crucial for the raid to stay clear of this boss's frontal area to avoid being hit by this ability. And there you have it. This fight may be a bit shorter compared to other final bosses, but don't be fooled, the last phase is truly chaotic. Here's a TLDR, and I hope this helps your team get aotc. I sincerely appreciate all of you for tuning in to my boss guides this tier, and for your continuous support of my channel. Thank you, and until next time, bye.